Title: The Silence of Room 217. In the quiet mountain town of Estes Park, Colorado, there stood an old hotel whose walls carried whispers from another time. The Stanley Hotel. Its white facade gleamed against the dark ridge behind it, beautiful and cold, like a monument built to remember something no one wanted to remember. For decades, travelers had come seeking comfort, luxury, or simply a good night's rest. Some left with photographs and pleasant stories, others left shaken, unable to sleep again without seeing the flicker of gas lamps in their dreams. On an overcast evening in late October, a travel writer named Michael Harris arrived at the Stanley. He was there to gather inspiration for a book on haunted places in America. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really. He believed in atmosphere, in stories told by frightened people who wanted to make sense of the dark. The hotel greeted him with polished floors, velvet curtains, and the soft ticking of an old grandfather clock in the lobby. The air smelled faintly of pine and furniture polish. Everything was too quiet. Even the sound of his suitcase wheels seemed out of place. The receptionist smiled politely as she handed him his key, a brass tag engraved with 217. "That room has a bit of history," she said. Her voice was kind, but her eyes didn't meet his. "If anything feels strange, call the front desk." Michael smiled, amused. "Strange?" She hesitated. "You'll see." He climbed the wide staircase, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. The carpet was thick, muffling sound after each step. The air grew colder as he reached the second floor. Room 217 was at the end of a long corridor lined with portraits of guests long dead, men in suits, women in white dresses, all staring at him as if they knew he didn't belong. The key turned smoothly. The door creaked open. Inside, the room looked ordinary. Victorian furniture, a four-poster bed, heavy curtains, but something about it felt untouched, as though the air hadn't moved in years. He unpacked his things, set up his laptop, and began taking notes. For a while, the only sound was the tapping of keys and the faint hum of the radiator. Then, just past midnight, the hum stopped. A silence thick as smoke filled the room. Michael frowned and checked the thermostat. It was still on, but the air felt wrong, charged, like before a thunderstorm. The curtains fluttered slightly, though the windows were closed. He went to bed around 1. The lights dimmed to a golden glow. He dreamed of water dripping. A faint sound at first, then louder. When he woke, his pillow was damp. Confused, he turned on the lamp. The ceiling above the bed was dry. The bathroom sink wasn't running. Yet, the pillow was wet, cold, like someone had been sitting there with wet hair. He laughed nervously and changed the pillowcase. The clock read 3:17. That number stayed in his mind for the rest of the night. The next morning, the hotel seemed brighter, less intimidating. Michael ate breakfast in the dining room, surrounded by elderly tourists and couples whispering over coffee. When he asked the waiter if anyone else had stayed in room 217 recently, the man froze for half a second before answering. "Not for long," he said. By afternoon, Michael explored the grounds. The mountains were cloaked in low clouds, and the wind carried the scent of snow. He wandered into the ballroom, where sunlight slanted through tall windows. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air. He imagined the place decades ago, filled with laughter, piano music, the shimmer of gowns. Now, the silence was heavy. The air pressed down on him like deep water. Back in his room, he reviewed local newspaper clippings. One headline caught his eye. "Explosion in room 217, chambermaid survives blast, 1911." The article described how a gas leak had caused a massive explosion, injuring a young maid named Elizabeth Wilson. She survived, barely. After that, guests reported hearing footsteps in empty corridors, doors unlocking themselves, lights flickering when no one was near. That night, he stayed up writing about it, fascinated. Around midnight, the lights flickered. Once, twice. He froze. The typewriter, an antique the hotel had placed on the desk as decoration, began to move. Slowly, the carriage slid left to right. Keys pressed down, one by one. "Hello." Michael's breath caught. The air felt colder. He forced a laugh and whispered, "Cue trick." The machine typed again. "Reyoulone." He stepped back. The machine fell silent. The keys were still. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock broke the quiet. He unplugged the typewriter. It typed once more. "Shenevleft." Michael didn't sleep that night. By morning, he decided to leave, but when he went to the lobby, the receptionist was gone. The room was empty, though the clock still ticked. He rang the bell. No one came. The world outside the windows looked the same, but wrong somehow. The light was dimmer. The air was thick, almost metallic. He turned toward the staircase. The portraits on the wall were different. The faces had changed. One of them, near the top, was his. He stumbled back. His own face stared down at him, expressionless, wearing the same clothes he wore now. He ran to his room, heart pounding. The number on the door wasn't 217 anymore. It was blank, just a brass plate with no markings. Inside, the furniture was covered in white sheets. The air was stale. There was dust on the floor, thick dust, except for his footprints. He looked toward the mirror. There was a woman standing behind him. Her hair hung wet around her shoulders. Her face was pale, eyes hollow, mouth slightly open as if mid-breath. She raised one hand and pointed toward the bed. Michael turned. The sheets had been pulled back. The mattress was soaked, water dripping steadily onto the carpet. He backed away, whispering, "This isn't real." When he looked again, the woman was gone, but her reflection remained. The air grew icy. His breath fogged. He ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. The keyhole was gone. The window wouldn't move either. Outside, the sky had darkened to the color of bruised steel. He shouted for help. His voice was swallowed by the walls. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate. From the hallway, someone was walking toward the room. He pressed his ear to the door. The steps stopped right outside. Then, a soft knock. 3 times. He didn't answer. The knock came again, louder. The handle turned. The door creaked open a few inches. No one stood there. He leaned closer. "Hello?" A whisper answered. Too close, as if spoken directly into his ear. "Leave." He slammed the door and stumbled back, breathing hard. The room pulsed with silence, the kind that hums deep in the bones. On the nightstand, the old typewriter waited. A fresh sheet of paper slid into place by itself. The keys began to move. IWARNEDYOU. He grabbed his bag, desperate, clawing at the window latch until it broke. The cold air burst in, scattering papers across the room. He climbed out, dropping onto the narrow ledge below. Wind howled. He looked down. 3 stories. He'd break his legs if he jumped. He turned his head. Another window was open just a few feet away. Dim light spilled out. He climbed toward it, gripping the ledge with trembling fingers. When he reached the frame, he froze. Inside, he saw himself, sitting at the desk, typing. The figure looked up. Same eyes, same face. The doppelganger smiled. Michael screamed and lost his grip. He hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his body. He gasped, tried to move, couldn't. Above him, the hotel loomed against the gray sky. A single figure watched from the window of room 217. When rescuers found him the next morning, he was alive but unconscious. They said he'd fallen from the 2nd floor, though there were no open windows. In the hospital, he woke briefly. When asked what happened, he whispered only one word, her. He died that night, before dawn. Weeks later, a new guest checked into the Stanley Hotel. The receptionist handed him a key, brass, polished, engraved with 217. She smiled politely, but her eyes didn't meet his. "If anything feels strange," she said, "call the front desk."